Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Newsweek's live reader Q&A with Dr. Jill Stein, the Green Party's candidate for the 2024 presidential election. Thank you to all the many Newsweek readers who've submitted questions already. And those watching can also join in the conversation in real time by submitting your questions to Dr. Stein via our live chat on YouTube. So Dr. Stein, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We're just over 4 weeks out from election day, and you must be very busy on the campaign trail. Now, in the interview we did a week or so ago, during which you talked about the rising support levels you're getting from Muslim and Arab Americans in swing states, the interview created a lot of interest and engagement with our readership. So that's why we're hosting this live Q&A for the next 45 minutes or so. And hopefully we'll get through several readers' questions in that time. So first up, we have a question from Jonathan Simon, who asks that, given that your candidacy is all but certain to draw votes from Harris in critical swing states, and thereby threatens to put Trump, who has been speaking regularly with Netanyahu and is clearly no friend to the Palestinian cause, back in power, how do you justify your continuing role?
Well, first, and thank you so much, Barney. Thank you to Newsweek for having this opportunity. Let me say that first, what happens in a democracy is that voters have choices between different candidates offering different platforms. So it's fundamentally, shall we say, anti-democratic to suggest that, that those choices be eliminated or not be available. Coming into this race, Gallup poll showed that over 60%, a record all-time high, of voters wanted other choices. And during the election as well, it was very evident that people were hungry for other opportunities. In terms of the impact on the genocide being conducted in Palestine right now by Israel and the United States, who knows what Donald Trump will do? It's certainly not preferable by all indicators to what the Harris-Biden or the Biden-Harris administration is doing right now. So we have one candidate who's actually committing the genocide right now. And in spite of her promises and her slightly milder rhetoric, is actually continuing the same full transfer of weapons, who refuses to consider even a weapons embargo to put a halt to the genocide. And then we have another candidate who's threatening to continue the job. So, if the American people want other options, they're certainly entitled to them. And, Donald Trump is a racist and a demagogue and a bully and a xenophobe. There's no doubt about that. But if you actually look at the track record of Democrats, they have been, both Obama and Biden exceeded all deportations of the Democratic administrations prior to them. They have been leading the charge against our civil liberties. Democrats have been building cop cities in Democratic administrations around the country and training police in the very oppressive tactics, often with the Israeli Defense Forces as the trainers of local police and so on. So this is a bipartisan problem, and it's extremely costly, let me also say that, to the American people. Half of our congressional budget under both Democrats and Republicans, and it rises year by year. Half of our congressional budget is now being spent on the endless war machine. The average household, according to Jeffrey Sachs at the Columbia University Department of Economics, let me say that the average household spent $12,000 this year alone on the endless war machine. So this needs to be debated, it needs to be discussed, and the American people need to have options.
Thank you very much. And we've got a question here from CC Arshagra, who asks, why are you not simply stating that you do not desire, nor do not want or need any die-hard Harris voters or any die-hard Trump voters at all? You only need every American who gave up on voting, would never vote out of fear or hatred, and would never vote for either of the two corporate choices.
And thank you to CC Arshagra. That's a very good point. And what we emphasize, we are not targeting any particular voter. And in fact, even the idea that we're aiming for swing states is actually not correct. Right now, we're campaigning in Maine. We had a brief stop in Michigan yesterday, didn't even stay overnight. And before that, we were in Texas, actually spending several days along the border, where people who've been traditionally Democratic now feel completely abandoned and betrayed by the policies of the Democrats, like the Republicans, with basically their lives being militarized along the border. So we are not spending our time exclusively in swing states. We are trying to give the American voter, who broadly across the board are hungry for other choices and hungry to hear the real issues in their lives debated. So, we are not targeting any one voter. To your point about those who aren't voting, this is really critical, and I can't stress it enough. 1 out of every 3 eligible voters chose not to vote in the last presidential election in 2022. 1 out of every 3 voters is just about enough to win a 3-way race. And in fact, this is in most states, this is a 4-way race where RFK is still on the ballot. So non-traditional voters who tend to be younger, of color, and lower income. That's exactly who our agenda speaks to, and that's very much who we are who we are hoping to mobilize in this election.
Thank you very much. And we have a question here from Leo Moore, who says, don't you think that Trump will just give Netanyahu the go-ahead to bomb Muslims without restraint, so he can say that, see, I ended the war just as I promised to?
All options are possible with Donald Trump. And, to my mind, that is one of the many, problems with Donald Trump as a, he's not a public servant, shall we put it that way. And he's also not exactly a rational or predictable actor. So in my view, we are in danger if Donald Trump is in the White House, but we are also very clearly in danger with the Biden-Harris White House. And, presumably, since she promises to continue most of the policies, and especially the foreign policy of the Biden administration, we're in danger. The problem is not only that this current foreign policy, and with regards to Gaza and the genocide, with regard to Israel, with regard to the Middle East, and far beyond, we have been conducting a very aggressive foreign policy. As Martin Luther King said many years ago, my country is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. This accounts, as I mentioned before, for half of our congressional dollars, which are urgently needed here at home for healthcare, for the housing emergency that we're facing, for the education crisis, and for the climate crisis, as we are looking now at a second, record number of hurricanes hitting the Southeast, with incredible devastation. We have critical issues right here, and FEMA doesn't have the money that it needs even to provide the relief that's urgently needed right now, even before the second storm has hit in the southeastern U.S. So we have critical needs right now. And for us to be squandering over $1 trillion every year on the endless war machine, of which this war in Gaza, or I should say the genocide in Gaza, is a symbol. This is a microcosm of a policy of militarism that's completely gone off the rails. So whether it's Donald Trump or the current policy that we have right now under the Biden-Harris administration, this is really a disaster for the American people as well as for the rest of the world. One other thing, if I could add quickly, is that, it was revealed last week that the Biden-Harris administration was actually egging on Israel to attack Lebanon. So not only are they not working tirelessly for a ceasefire, as they say, they're actually promoting a continuing, horrific and disastrous genocidal war, which is now going into Lebanon. Previously, Israel had just extended many of its genocidal, assaults into the West Bank. We have seen Israel also very seriously striking Yemen and Syria and Iran as well. And Iran is in a alliance with Russia. Russia has nuclear weapons, Israel has nuclear weapons, and some of its elected officials have actually threatened to use them. So this is an extremely dangerous situation right now. And we need to be adults in the room. We need to be ramping this down effectively. The President of the United States has the ability to simply pick up the phone and tell Israel and Bibi Netanyahu that this genocidal war is over. The President of the United States, namely Ronald Reagan, not exactly a major peace advocate himself, he did so with far less of a massacre going on the part of Israel back in the 1980s. So there are precedents for doing this. We have, we control the weapons, we control the financing for the war, we provide the diplomatic cover and the intelligence. So this war is over as soon as the White House decides it's over. And the American people have very clearly gone on record long ago, as early as last November of last year. The American people, 68%, according to a Reuters poll at that time, wanted an immediate ceasefire. And polls since then, in the last 2 months approximately, have shown that the American people actually want a weapons embargo now in order to stop the war. And the Harris-Biden administration has the power to do that right now, and they are not doing that. They're doing exactly the opposite. They are expanding this war, which is extremely dangerous to all of us.
Thank you very much. We have a question here from Sean Gunning, who says, if you're serious about having a legitimate third party, why is it that you only show up every 4 years, and why run at all when you know you can't win? You're not even on every state's ballot.
So we are on the ballot for 95% of voters, and we would have been on the ballot for all of them if the Democrats were not using their usual dirty tricks to throw us off the ballot for trivial and really unfair reasons. They were able to do that in just a handful of states, and we are on the ballot as write-in candidates where the Democrats were able to block, not just us, but block the American people from having choices. We actually don't go away except for every 4 years. We are here doing the work. What goes away is actually coverage by the mainstream media. So they create the illusion that we come and go. But no, actually we are here. We are building. We are getting stronger. We have had approximately 1,500 elected officials at the local level over the past 2 decades or so that we've been around. We currently have about 150 elected officials. So we are very much involved at all levels. And in fact, we are required, in order to have ballot status, we are required to run at the presidential level. So this isn't even rules of our creation. This is the only way that we can ensure that the American people actually have choices. And this is fundamentally what democracy is about. Democracy is about a competition of ideas in the political discourse. So that's what we're here for. This is what the American people are demanding.
Thank you very much. And we have a question here from Peter Angelo. What would you accept from Harris for your endorsement?
I wish that it were that simple. A promise made at this point has absolutely no guarantees that it will happen. So let me give an example. It was suggested earlier on that we promised to drop out of the race if Harris would engage in a ceasefire right now and would force Israel to have a ceasefire. Unfortunately, they could do that now and then next week change their mind, or after the election they could change their mind. And unfortunately, this isn't a quick fix. This is a long haul here, because it's not only the genocide, it's also the decades, 76 years and more of ethnic cleansing. It is the occupation. It is the apartheid state of government in Israel. So this is going to require consistent pressure And as Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. So we are here to give voice to the demand of the American people, which we know from polling. We know also from, innumerable sources that the American people, like the people around the world, want this war and this conflict to be ended in a way that is consistent with international law and human rights. So this will be a long haul. If we drop out, well, let me just back up to say the Democrats could win those votes back right now simply by doing it. They could win those votes because they've lost most of the vote of the Muslim American and the Arab American community, at least according to opinion polls. And that's in many swing states. So this is a problem really of their own creation, but they can fix it. There's absolutely nothing stopping them from fixing it. And we encourage them and repeatedly urge that they do that. If they do nothing but create a ceasefire and a weapons embargo right now, I think that would be extremely persuasive to people. And we're here for the long haul because, as Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. So we have to represent, the continuing pressure of the American people for our government to actually represent us and not simply make a strategic move in advance of the election, which is what we see, election after election. We see promises made, whether it's a $15 minimum wage or a public option or bulk purchasing of all pharmaceuticals or a bailout for student debt. This is, unfortunately, this is the rule, not the exception, that the Democrats are making promises that they absolutely do not fulfill. So it would be extremely deadly for us to act on that sort of promise. If you do not run in an election, you lose much of your ballot status for subsequent races. And given how the costs of achieving ballot status have skyrocketed markedly, for us to give up ballot status now across the country would make it virtually impossible for us to get it back and offer the American people choices, not only about the genocide in Gaza, but also about healthcare as a human right, or about addressing our housing crisis or the education crisis. And I'm sure we'll get to that later in the discussion, but there are many solutions that are available to us right now that you will not hear crickets about from the politics that is bought and paid for by the economic elites.
Thank you very much. Should say, of course, that Israel denies that it's carrying out genocide, just for the sake of balance in the discussion. On to the next question from Brian Gay, who asks, what would a Stein administration seek to achieve in the first 100 days? And why should voters believe Greens will govern any differently than Democrats and Republicans?
Okay, that's a very good point. And let me also just add on this question of genocide that it is only Israel and the United States who deny that there is genocide being conducted. So it's important to realize that the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, gave this very careful consideration, and on their panel of 15 international judges, there was virtual unanimity about the reality of this genocide. So yes, the US and Israel will deny it, but they're pretty much alone on that. Now, in the first 100 days, so number one, we'll pick up the phone and call Bibi Netanyahu, and the genocide will be over. If he doesn't agree to that, then there will be an economic and military boycott, and you can be sure that it will be over within days, because Israel cannot sustain this war, especially this enlarging war that it is working very hard to create. It cannot sustain that by itself. So the war will be over effectively the minute our administration picks up the phone and deems it so. Another thing that we will do on day one is declare a climate emergency. We are seeing that emergency before our very eyes right now in these horrific hurricanes that are hitting the southeast coast with incredible destructive power. The Hurricane Helene, has set a record now. It's somewhere over 200 deaths, but with many hundreds unaccounted for, and people cut off from food and water, and enormous destruction of basic survival infrastructure across many states. And now we're seeing another hurricane in the same path I think it's called Milton, coming up pretty much for a second hit without a recovery time and without the U.S., having the resources to adequately deal with this. We are calling for an emergency Green New Deal, which simply by declaring a climate emergency on day one, we unleash over $500 billion in emergency funding to prevent the impact of the next super hurricane and all the wrecks. The Colorado River is within 1 year, approximately, maybe 2 at best, of drying up. And that means the California agriculture system goes down, and that provides half the fruits and vegetables for the country. So we think we've seen the inflation of food prices. Just wait a year or two, and this is going completely off the rails. And same on many scores, including the devastating heat waves, the superstorms, the drought, the flooding, the wildfires, which again are hitting areas of the U.S. In actually record and devastating impacts. So there's so much that we need to address right now. While the Democrats claim to solve the climate crisis with the Inflation Reduction Act, in fact, they're not doing it in ways that we can address. But our emergency Green New Deal will strive to phase out fossil fuels within the next 10 years. And we do that by creating jobs so that all of those workers currently employed in those industries have jobs, which are not only better for the environment and our water supply and the climate and our agriculture, but are much better for them, are safer to the workers who bear a huge burden right now in the fossil fuel industry. So that's another thing. In the first 100 days, we will also take AIPAC to court. AIPAC, which spends, $100 million in this election to basically strongly influence the outcome, and affiliated organizations, which are responsible for suddenly the coordinated appearance of all these draconian rules on campuses across the country that prevent freedom of speech and freedom of expression of the basic values of the American people. So we will take AIPAC to court, as many have suggested, for violation of FARA, that is the Foreign Agent Registration Act, and we'll let the courts decide, which I think they will. There's enormous evidence right now. In fact, the Knesset has been, that is the Israeli parliament, has been found to actually be funding many of these nonprofits that are coordinating these policy changes, including the anti-BDS legislation across some 27 states. And that's based on investigative reporting by Li Fang, the known investigative reporter formerly with The Intercept. And I suggest people take a look at that. Also on day one, we will begin a shift in our immigration policy, which I can talk about at greater length. But instead, let me put it this way, the biggest driver of the immigration crisis, or to say, the most effective thing we can do to solve the immigration crisis is to stop causing it in the first place, through regime change operations, through destabilizing other governments like we have done to Haiti, through actual coups that we were very much instrumental in removing the democratically elected leader Aristide in Haiti twice, which then allowed U.S. corporations, and actually under the watch of Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State, we reversed their minimum wage improvement. They doubled their minimum wage in Haiti from 30 cents an hour to all of 60 cents an hour. And the U.S. basically went in and reversed that minimal improvement in their minimum wage. And we see the chaos coming out of Haiti, and so on. So we will begin to initiate a change in immigration policy, starting with ending many of the drivers. And related to that, I'll just mention one other thing, which is that we will legalize marijuana on day one and remove it from the list of scheduled drugs, so that we can treat substance use as a public health problem, not a criminal problem. Because when we criminalize drugs, marijuana, other drugs, we basically then encourage the black market and the drug cartels. We contribute enormously to their profits, and we make it possible for them to have a lot of power and to conduct the violence that they currently inflict on many countries south of the border and in this country as well. And through legalization, we basically remove the most harmful aspect of the illegal drug industry. So that would get us started. One last thing I'll mention here, and I know I already said that, but this will be the actual last thing about the first 100 days. We'll also undertake an antitrust lawsuit against the consolidated media in order to help break it up and get us back to where we were even 10 years ago or 20 years ago, when there were many other smaller options that were not quite so, invested in the status quo and sort of propping up business as usual and the talking points of the Department of Defense and the Secretary of State office, to have a more diverse press that can truly fulfill its mission of being a watchdog to power and not a lapdog to power. The American people need to be informed. The First Amendment is first for many important reasons. We need to be informed and empowered. And I must note, of course, that there are many exceptions to that rule about mainstream media, and with great appreciation to Newsweek for holding this this Q&A. And briefly, why we will not go the way of all the other usual politicians, and I consider myself an anti-politician, not a politician. We are not paid by the usual suspects to stay the course. So we do not take money from corporate PACs. We do not work in conjunction with super PACs, and we disavow super PACs and any collaboration with them. You cannot write $1 million check to our campaign, as you can to Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, RFK, etc. We do not allow these legalized loopholes that work their way around campaign finance laws. We follow the law. We are a people-powered campaign, so we're not taking the money of Big Pharma or Wall Street or the war industry or APAC, etc. We don't work with those funding streams. Who funds you runs you, and we are funded by everyday American people. So that is why we have the policies that we do, and there's no going back on that. That's who we are. That's built into our DNA.
Thank you very much. I have a question here from Alan Covey, who asks you, do you favour the inevitable dismantling of the US constitutional form of democratic government, which would surely follow if Harris loses the 2024 election?
Well, let me say, I think that our basic form of government is being dismantled right now as we speak. In particular, the assault on freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom to protest. The Democrats, the Republicans are known for, in the last election, for Donald Trump interfering with the peaceful transfer of power after an election. They also strip voter rolls, I might add, in advance of the election. So they're interfering on both ends. If you look at what the Democrats do and have long been doing, they strip voter choices, democracy, in advance of the election by throwing their competitors off the ballot. And by, they announced last March that they were hiring an army of lawyers in order to throw competitors like myself off the ballot. And they exercised lawfare, basically using trivial details of the law to try to overcome the spirit of the law. So they took us to court about 5 times in 5 different states to try to throw us off the ballot for illegitimate reasons, which were rejected by the court for either the court or by the election commissions, because these are illegitimate reasons that are attempting to basically shut down free and fair elections. Free and fair elections can be interfered with by preventing competitors from running. This is a classic, tried and true technique of authoritarian governments. So it's not okay to be attacking free and fair elections through the misuse of courts. Also, the Democrats publicly advertised to hire managers of spies and infiltrators in order to disrupt our campaign. An example of that, they were caught red-handed in the midterms in 2022 where the Democrats were impersonating the Green Party. In my view, that's, how's that different from fraud? I don't know. And election interference. They impersonated Greens and called people who had signed the petition of our candidate, Matthew Ho, a peace candidate, a former, a veteran, and, a wonderful candidate, a very compelling candidate, and they were very threatened by his race. And so they were using their usual dirty tricks. These are not unusual. And they impersonated the Green Party and called people who had signed his petition, and impersonating the Green Party told the signers that they should take their name off the petition, that the party had decided they didn't want to run our candidate. Well, they happened to call the co-chair of the Green Party, who had the presence of mind to record the conversation and presented it to court. And the Democrats were found guilty of this attempt. It was called operating with dirty hands. Seems like a euphemism for election interference, in my view. And they, the Democrats were found guilty of that and fined several $1,000s, which was a mere slap of the hand for actually having kept our candidate off the ballot for the majority of the election and only allowed him on really at the last minute, effectively defeating him. But this is what they do over and over again. This is an assault on our democracy in the same way that assaulting our First Amendment rights is also a very serious assault on our democracy. Money in politics, in my view, allowing billions of dollars to be spent on elections, which effectively shuts out the voices of the American people. All of these are basic attacks by creating these ballot access laws that virtually exclude other challengers in elections. All of these are an assault on our democracy. It doesn't matter which party they're coming from. That's why we're standing up, with a whole agenda for basic democracy reforms that ensure that our democracy will be far better served than what we're getting right now under a Green administration.
Thank you very much. And a question here from Michael McKimmey, presumably in the context of Israel's wars with Hamas and Hezbollah. Who would be your Secretary of State?
My hope is that it would be Jeffrey Sachs, who is an extremely experienced statesman, has really sat at the front lines of major national decisions, really for all of his professional career for decades. A very thoughtful statesman who's actually very active at the level of the UN, advising many governments around the world, and has an extremely distinguished career. He is an endorser of our campaign, was an earlier endorser, and my hope is that he will be with us into the White House if we are so lucky as to turn the White House into a green house and make the world a better place for it.
Thank you very much. We've got a question here from Robert, who asks, what are your plans for elderly care? My wife and I have elderly parents, and finding affordable care is almost impossible.
It is indeed. The costs of care, especially for chronic care, are really devastating for America's families. And fortunately, our solution for health care provides comprehensive care, including, things that are not covered now, like eyeglasses and hearing, mental health care, which affects everyone, of course, at all ages, but chronic care and home care. In order to get that kind of care now, you have to spend yourself into poverty and then get covered under Medicaid. So this will be covered as a matter of course for everyone. And if your parent would like to have their care at home, you are covered for home care as well. So we not only provide full care, but care with a whole variety of options. You're also not limited into narrow networks and particular facilities, which you are right now through most forms of health insurance. So you have far wider choice and much fuller coverage under healthcare as a human right, basically an improved Medicare for all system that would be provided for everyone. And let me mention also that because it is a single payer system like Medicare, that alone saves so much money. It more than pays for the expansion of healthcare so that it is comprehensive and so that it covers everyone. So this is a win-win. We actually save money. It doesn't cost us, because right now, 1 out of every 3 healthcare dollars is being spent on bureaucracy and red tape of our very complicated multi-insurer privatized system. 1 out of every 3 healthcare dollars goes into tracking who should be paid and how much should they be paid. If you were in the hospital and you had a CT scan, or you got a Band-Aid, or you had an IV put in, exactly what did you get? Does that health insurance cover that particular benefit, and how much of it do they cover? I mean, there's a mountain of paperwork that goes into current healthcare administration right now. And we save so much money by moving to a single payer system, a Medicare type system, or shall we say an expanded Medicare system, that in fact we gain $500 billion every year would be saved by moving to such a system that ensures that everyone, cradle to grave, and that means our elderly and ailing parents and our families, everyone is fully covered comprehensively through a progressive tax base, so that those who are not paying their fair share now, who are most able to pay, they have to start chipping in, whereas middle class and working and poor people, the cost is massively reduced, and it's all coming through the tax base, not at the point of service. When you are sick, you need to be able to focus on getting well, not on the crisis of how are you going to pay your medical debt. Right now, there are somewhere around 100 million Americans who are facing medical debt. This is absolutely, devastating for the American people and for our economy. So this is a win-win all around.
Thank you very much. And we've got a question in from Michael Mistretta, who asks you, how will Harris losing and Trump winning change Israel's actions? Trump believes Israel should take any action they deem necessary, while certainly not supporting Palestinians, Arabs, or Muslims, as his past actions as president show. How is Trump not more dangerous to the Palestinian cause?
How is it possible to be more dangerous than basically carpet bombing practically every square inch of Gaza? Gaza has been basically flattened. About 80% of the buildings have been destroyed, especially the hospitals. There's negligible functioning medical care right now, and there's an absolutely total embargo. Medical care can't get in either, and the most basic, like intravenous fluid for kids who are starving to death and who are dying of thirst. They don't even have water or food to eat. How do you get worse than bombing, and missile striking refugees in tents that have no food and water or sanitation, for that matter? They do not even have a place to go to the bathroom. Many of them are basically living in free-flowing sewage. I mean, this is not just murder on an industrial scale. This is also torture, day by day, of 2 million people. And the UN says that even under current conditions, without them being expanded at all, that 1 million people are basically at risk for being killed in the course of the next month. So this is genocide. It doesn't get worse than genocide. So you've got genocide, one who's committing genocide right now, and another who promises to finish the cause. We need representation for we, the American people, who know full well that we can stop this in the blink of an eye, and we can move our tax dollars into our urgent needs here at home. When at the behest, we now see, of the Biden-Harris administration, Israel attacked Lebanon and expanded the war. What was the response of the Biden-Harris administration? They provided another $8.9 approximately billion worth of military assistance. So they're being egged on, and they're being rewarded for a war that becomes more genocidal and more suicidal, because as this war gets bigger, we are approaching not only, we are in now a regional war, and we have our U.S. servicemen and women are very much at risk. We have 2 aircraft carrier strike groups, one based off of Iran, one based off of Israel in the Eastern Mediterranean. There are some 40,000 U.S. Servicemen and women who are already stationed in the Middle East, who are very much at risk for what's going on there. And the Biden-Harris administration has actually promised to send more, and they haven't said how many, but there are more, effectively boots on the ground that are going there right now. And by the way, we also have a draft now. People may not be aware because you are being automatically registered if you are between the ages of 18 and 25, and a male currently, although it may be extended to women as well. You're being registered for the draft, and all we need is for the Biden-Harris administration to say is that we're in an emergency conflict, and there you go. So it's not only our tax dollars, but it is the lives of American men and women as well, who are very much at risk in all of this now. So we need to back off, and we need to remove from power the warmongers who are driving this conflict. And we need to enable the American people to be represented by adults in the room who are capable of conducting diplomacy, so that we can put international law, human rights, and diplomacy ahead of, of this very aggressive foreign policy. According to the Congressional Research Service, the U.S. has sent the troops in to various countries 250 times in the last 30 years alone. So we need a whole-scale new approach to foreign policy in general, and that needs to begin right now with this genocidal expanding war that Bibi Netanyahu has been, deeply committed to and has been trying to drag the U.S. into for months.
Thank you very much. We've had a question just in from Kelly, who's in the Pacific Northwest, and he or she asks, is the filibuster constitutional, and would you abolish it if elected president?
So there is no basis in the Constitution for the filibuster, and it could be overcome by actually, I would have to look into exactly how that is overcome. I believe it can be overcome simply through congressional rules. But yes, we would be very interested in allowing majority rule to take place in the Senate and in the House of Representatives. We need to have majority rule, and for closure to be brought when the filibuster is being used. So we need a change in those rules, and those rules have been changed previously by other administrations. So we can certainly find out what the details of that are and can follow in suit in order to overcome the filibuster. We need to have a majority rule. That's basically what democracy is based on. And I think we are entirely within our rights by ensuring that we can have more effective government. Right now we accomplish very little. The two parties basically agree on war, and it's usually, shall we say, it's usually of concern when the two parties get together. It's Wall Street bailouts and tax giveaways. That's kind of what they excel on agreeing on, and that's the sort of legislation that passes. So we need to have more meaningful legislation and the opportunity to actually get things done in response to the really urgent needs of the American people.
Thank you. And a question from Sylvio Pina. How do you intend to contend with the deep-seated agencies that keep continuity and influence, no matter who is president, and should their mandates be limited?
Okay, that's a really, really great question. And, there will need to be actions taken on many fronts. So, appointments may need to be fundamentally revised, and a new crop of appointments may need to be made, but it's not as simple as that because often there's just institutional memory. So one thing that we are committed to doing is creating congressional hearings to actually look into the operations of the so-called deep state, like, for example, the operations of the CIA and its impact on our foreign policy. There needs to be daylight shined on all of that. And that includes, not only releasing the redacted portions of like the JFK, findings in that report on the JFK assassination, for example. But we need to have a clear daylight shown on the operations of our of our various security agencies, like what the Church Commission did back in the late 60s and 70s. We need to have really a full accounting of what the operations of these agencies are, and to absolutely consider restricting their mandates, as you rightly suggested.
Thank you. We're running close towards the end of our time slot, but just a couple more quick questions, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, we were a little late because of technical snafus on our end, so we're glad to extend this for a few minutes.
Thank you. First up, a question from Greg Ketman, who asks, what makes you think you can make socialism work in the United States when it's failed everywhere around the world where it has been tried?
So to tell you the truth, I don't particularly look at isms. I look more at policies and who's running the show. Right now, we sort of have socialism for large corporations. We have huge tax giveaways. We have policies that basically deliver enormous advantages to private corporations. So this is not working for the American people. Over 60% of American workers are living paycheck to paycheck. Half of renters are paying 30 to 50% of their monthly income just to keep a roof over their heads, which doesn't leave money for paying your student debt, et cetera. We have a crisis of student debt and higher education. The economic policies of the Democrats have been described as the neoliberal agenda and the foundations. And this is shared by the Republicans, and, at best, the Republicans also subscribe to this. So it's not just the Democrats. It's really a bipartisan policy of neoliberalism, which is all about privatization, privatizing our public resources like higher education, like common land, our water supply, for example, which is being privatized in a disastrous way. So neoliberalism, again, is privatization of public goods. It is large tax giveaways. It is austerity applied to the public, because the tax breaks often the tax breaks to large corporations basically usurp our budgets for roads and bridges and public higher education and our schools, for example. There are enormous ways that the public budget is privatized and doled out to corporations. And if you look at the job that they do, it's generally inferior to what we do when things are either handled by small businesses, and we will use antitrust laws, by the way, to break up the major corporate conglomerates that restrict and prevent our small businesses from flourishing and thriving. Small businesses are really struggling right now. And also the neoliberal agenda is committed to the war machine and to endless wars. So issue by issue, we will be fixing that regardless of the ism. But for example, on healthcare, to move to a Medicare for all system, you may call that socialism, but actually, this is like Medicare. It is a public service. Do we call the fire department socialism, or public libraries, or public schools? No, these are institutions that serve the public. They very much need to, to operate under principles of transparency and accountability. You cannot have government without that. Having a functioning government, whether you call it, doing justice or human rights or socialism, I don't care what label you put on it, but we have a responsibility to have an accountable and transparent government, which actually delivers services that are urgently needed. And we don't have that right now, and we could.
Thank you very much. And final question from Jose Garcia. How will fighting to keep Harris from winning and helping Trump win benefit Muslims?
So you may have heard about a letter from the imams, and at last record there were something like 130 of the most renowned and respected Muslim imams that was signed and made public, I believe, over the weekend. So this is now public information, and I'd say don't take it from my, don't take it from my mouth, hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak, hear it from the Muslim community, that they strongly believe that a vote for Harris is a vote for genocide, and a vote for Trump is a vote for genocide. And they have encouraged Muslims to stand up and vote for a third party candidate that opposes genocide across the board. And, we are receiving enormous support right now from the Arab American and the Muslim American community, because this is the way that they feel. They feel like they have survived 4 years of Trump in the past, and the people of Gaza and Muslims around the world have, are not surviving, in particular the people in Palestine, are not surviving under Kamala Harris, and that we can benefit, all of us, by moving to a foreign policy that respects Muslims, that is not at war with Muslims. And I must say that being at war with Muslims endangers Muslims in this country, because we see this horrible rise in violence against people of Muslim faith in this country right now. As I must say that the genocide being conducted by the State of Israel is also leading to a rise in anti-Semitism. Opposing the genocide is not anti-Semitic. That is focused on Zionism, not Judaism, on Zionism, a political ideology that has been founded on the notion of ethnically cleansing Palestinians from their land and appropriating that land. So that is where the issue is. This is not a religious war. When the Zionists came into Israel, they ethnically cleansed not only Muslims, but Christians and Jews. Religious Jews were also basically horribly treated and violently treated, as they still are by the Zionists today. So this is not a religious conflict. This is a problem with Zionism, and opposing genocide is not anti-Semitic. There are ultra-Orthodox Jewish rabbis who are very vocal themselves in saying that it's anti-Jewish to be conducting the ethnic cleansing and the policies of the Zionists. The Orthodox rabbis consider Zionism a threat to basic Jewish values themselves. So I'll just say, whatever religion you're looking at, we all need to be brought together. And that's very much what we are seeing right now in the American public, which broadly agrees. And Jewish Voice for Peace, if not now, when? Many Jewish organizations have also been leading the way here, hand in hand with Muslim organizations and Christian organizations, and atheists who as well, who are fighting for human rights and international law, which are all very much at risk right now in the genocidal war, which is expanding to threaten all of us. So it benefits Muslims, it benefits all of us for us to be demanding that this genocide be put to an end, as well as the policies of apartheid, occupation, and ethnic cleansing. And if people want to know more, please go to jillstein2024.com, and you can find out more about our policies, and also about 1 out of every 3 votes. Let me mention, 1 out of every 3 eligible voters did not vote in the last presidential election, because they do not buy what's being rammed down our throats, yet once again by the parties of war and Wall Street. So there are many people now who would come out to vote if they can hear about what the other options are. So we're trying to get the word out by volunteering. You can help: table, flyer, phone bank, door knock, etc. These are the ABCs of grassroots democracy, and we intend to use them to strengthen our democracy and to strengthen the momentum to achieve all of these policies. Whether we get them now or we get them in the future, we have to build the force to demand an America and a world that works for all of us. And that's what our campaign represents. And thank you again so very much, Barney, for this opportunity to speak directly with voters and with your readership. I really appreciate Newsweek doing this.
No, thank you very much for your time. It's been fascinating, and yes, thank you for answering all of those Newsweek readers' questions.
Glad to do it. Thanks so much. All best.